Hey, my name's Dr. Kyle Berkeley. I'm the author of The Wake and The Void, and I'm here to answer questions. First question: what is The Void? So, The Void is a story about a mother of four and her challenges living in the Ridgely Square community. She recently inherited a home from her deceased grandmother, Florence Sims, who was a community leader, and the community is facing a lot of challenges with gentrification, gang violence, and sex trafficking, and she's trying to find her place. Tiffany, the main character, Tiffany Gibbons, recently lost her daughter the previous year from a hit and run accident, and she's coming to terms of what does it mean now to go from being a single mom of five kids to now being a single mom of four kids with no other support. But being a homeowner at now and having a stake in the community when she was facing displacement when a company called Titan Industries displaced her when they purchased her apartment building and forced everybody to move out for the gentrification efforts. Uh, the next question was, do you need to read The Wake to enjoy The Void? While The Void is a spinoff from The Wake, you don't need to read the Wake to enjoy The Void. Actually, I do a pretty good job at catching you up to speed on a lot of the bullet points from what happened in The Wake in The Void. So that way when you dive into chapter one, you already know what's going on in the community. Uh, Another question. What is Ridgely Square? That's a pretty cool question. So Ridgely Square is a fictitious community in Baltimore City. It does have elements of real Baltimore City in it. So there's Harlem Park, there's Westport, Mount Winans, the Station North Arts District, Harlem Park. I think I mentioned Mount Winans already, but that's the gist of what Ridgely Square is. It's just different elements and a fictitious telling of different stories from those different communities, and I just merged them into one community itself and called it Ridgely Square. Yeah. So, who are the characters in The Void? There's Tiffany Gibbons. She's the main character of the story. She's a single mom. She's a sexual assault survivor, and she is also a new homeowner. There's Hakeem Andrews, who is a community leader. He is also a pastor. He took over a church that was led by the previous pastor who died from pancreatic cancer, and he was a community leader himself, and he looked at Hakeem as a leader. There's Jamar, who's Hakeem's brother. There's a lot of tension between those two, just because they have two different worldviews. There's Sasha, Tiffany's best friend, and Sasha's son died in a wake. He was murdered during a botched armed robbery. There's Marshawn Bell. He's the story's antagonist. He is a crooked police officer, but you realize there's a lot more to him than just being a crooked police officer. And there's Gina Sims. That's Tiffany's estranged aunt. She was a longtime substance abuser, and she recently started her recovery and wanted to bond with her family. And the last surviving people in her family, of course, is Tiffany and Tiffany's four surviving children. What's some interesting things about the characters in The Void? Like I mentioned, Sasha, who didn't have a major part at all in The Wake, is the mother of Tyrone Clinton. Tyrone Clinton was a young man that was murdered during a botched armed robbery. What's interesting about that whole situation is Tyrone was a star football player who kind of was bullied into a robbery carry out. And in the process of robbing and carry out, he didn't want to do it at all. And when he tried to give himself up because that wasn't the kind of life that he was in, but the person that was bullying him forced him to do it. Uh, he tried to show the gun to the police, and the police saw that he had a gun and killed him. So Sasha's been dealing with a lot of that grief, and it's an interesting dynamic between how Tiffany, Sasha, and Gina, all the three of those have all lost children, and the three of them are handling grief in different ways. Gina has been trying to get herself clean and really bond with her family. Tiffany is more like, I'm trying to just make this work. I just inherited a home after facing displacement from Titan Industries, and Sasha has developed a drinking problem. What is at stake in the void? What's at stake in the void is the community. You have a crooked police officer named Marshawn Bell and a group called the Narcotics and Firearms Task Force. Also, I call them NAFA, Narcotics and Firearms. So you have them running roughshod in the community, and then you have these fictitious gangs in the community because I didn't want to really pull too much from real life into this. So the fictitious gangs are the Alphas and the Cabal. And with the Alphas, they are working with NAFA, or NAFA's working with the Alphas, and they're both so they're raids and everything going on in the community where the Alphas are getting kickbacks from what NAFA is doing. So that's pretty a lot of interesting things at stake because now you have a gang that's able to do whatever they want in the community. What motivated me to write The Void? When I finished The Wake, it was 2018, and I was still writing, believe it or not. And I was like, okay, well, after this story in The Wake, I was like, what would happen next? And I did do a little tiny little excerpt at the end of where these characters were going. And I wasn't sure if I was going to actually do this Wake story or not. I kind of wanted to do a couple other stories, but it just kept growing. And I was like, I really love the Tiffany character. Even if you read The Wake, you can see there's a huge love for the writing of Tiffany's character and her family and those dynamics and how she's overcoming so much trauma, especially being sexually abused by her father growing up. So I really wanted to tell that story and really show like, okay, what does it mean now to be a mom of four? What does it mean to be displaced, but then you inherit a home and now you're a homeowner and you didn't expect to be a homeowner, let alone you didn't know that your grandmother had a will. And but the community that you're in is not the best community. And it already had problems before, which is what your mother, Florence Sims, I mean, sorry, your grandmother, Florence Sims, and what the previous pastor, Donald Avery, was fighting for was a lot of the issues. So, what does this mean now that you're now stuck in this problem that they were trying to fix, and the people that was trying to fix the problem aren't even around anymore? Where did I pull from to create the void? Lived experiences. I mean, I grew up in Baltimore City my whole life. So lived in Westport, lived off of Liberty for a while. And I have tons of friends from like the White Lock area and all over, so you pull from like real life stories, add a little razzle dazzle, same way how you would do with music, and voila. Honestly, I pulled also a lot from music. Like it's no secret. I used to write and I used to produce for a label called Arsenal Records. And while there, we had tons of real great records. So it's easy to pull from like a lot of those records and a lot of other artists I got the privilege to work with. So able to pull from that and a lot of music I like listening to. Um, I like a lot of different kinds of music as well. So there's a lot of different flavors in it. Um, how long did it take me to write The Void? That's a good question. I started writing The Void in 2018. I want to say I finished it around the time of the pandemic, or actually, I'm gonna say during the pandemic because I wrote this and I wrote the next book side by side. So The Wake, The Void, and the book that's coming out after this, The Legacy, were all written together. And looking back in retrospect, if I would have known how The Void would have took off, I would have definitely wrote The Wake a lot different. Um, did the real life gun trace task force have any impact on The Void? No. Actually, I knew stories of the Jump Out Boys. I grew up in that era where, with the Jump Out Boys, of course, no stranger to trying to ride the bus to school, and here they come, run up in your pockets, stealing your stuff, or I get paid on whatever. Working at Giant, I used to work at a supermarket called Giant, and you're coming from work, you just got paid. Back in the day, you could cash your paycheck at the supermarket you worked at. And I'm riding home, and whoop whoop, Jump Out Boys come out, empty your pockets. Next thing you know, they're stealing your whole paycheck. It's no secret. So, but I actually didn't pull any of that from the Gun Trace Task Force. I tried to stay as far away from that as possible. I wrote a lot of. This was based off of some other stuff that I'm not really going to get into, but it definitely was based on some other stuff that had nothing to do with the Gun Trace Task Force. What was my writing process for The Void? Like I said, listen to music. I read a lot of different books. I wanted to read like a lot of award-winning books. I learned a lot of mistakes from when I wrote The Wake, which was my first book. So I definitely wanted to get away from the mistakes I did in the first book. I didn't want to do too many characters in this book either. So I really wanted it to be a nice, concise story, with not too many characters. That way you wouldn't get lost with the story. Um, but so my writing process was, let's outline the story. So like each chapter was its own Roman numeral, and then built from there. Then I wanted to look at each character. What's their storyline? Where were they left at in the wake? And where do I want them to go? And I wanted this to stand alone. So I didn't want this to lean too hard on the wake because, mind you, there's a whole series to come with this. So there's the legacy, there's the union, there's standing in hell looking for heaven, and then there's the transition. That's all to come from this, right? So I didn't want to get too caught up into bound to everything that happened in the wake, because these characters are going to evolve. And that's exactly what this is the start of the evolution, especially with Tiffany's character. How many other parts are there? There's the Void. This one, part one. There's the Wake. Sorry, not the Wake. There's the Legacy, part two. There's the Union, part three, and then there is the Transition, which would be part four. So there'll be four parts, and then there's a slight spin-off book from a character in this called Standing in Hell Looking for Heaven, and that's going to be a book all about a very specific character, Marshawn Bell. And when is the next book coming out, and what is it called? It's called The Legacy. The Legacy hopefully will be out by February next year. And believe it or not, Standing in Hell Looking for Heaven, I want to put out before I put out The Union. I'm working on both of them as we speak. So I'm hoping Standing in Hell Looking for Heaven will be out somewhere around the summertime, early September of next year, like late summer, early September. And I'm going to put out The Union probably around this time, late November, early December of next year. So hopefully everybody's going to get 3 to 4 books next year from me. And there's tons more to come.